Samantha Chian, your host with Spirit of Nevada. This episode is brought to you by the Richard Harris Law Firm, helping families and injured victims throughout Nevada for over 40 years. Hope you enjoy the show. After filming with our friends at the Walking Box Ranch, I decided to dive deeper into Clara, Beau, and Rex Bell's life. During my interview with Ron, he had mentioned to me that UNLV carried their home collection. So I was really excited, and I emailed the professor right away, and Deidre said, come on in, I got a lot to show you. We've been working on this project for several months, and so we're also gonna be meeting one of the students, so let's go on in. When we were at the Walking Box Ranch, we learned a lot about the lovely actress Clara Beau. But what about her husband, Rex Bell? What was he like? And what influence did he have here in Nevada? He was a stylish cowboy who loved wearing custom clothing pieces. In 1945, he and his brother, Hodson, owned a Western clothing store in Las Vegas. And a few years later, he opened a similar shop in Reno. Rex starred in a number of films that were mostly Western. How did you end up with Clara Beau and Rex Bell's home collection?
The items in this collection really run a range of different kinds of things, from beautiful handmade embroidered shirts to chaps to all kind of ranching tools. And they came into the possession of UNLV through several different ways. Some of them were purchased by UNLV when we were managing the property, but some of them were given to us by Rex Bell Jr., who had a personal relationship with UNLV and gave us not only his family's personal photographs that you can find online currently through our library, but also a lot of the really important family artifacts, like his mother's kimono and things like his mother's makeup chest, where we know the provenance of them is great because they came from her son. So I know that's hers.
I have to ask, because there's a huge collection between clothes, and this is an old film, what they use for filming, correct?
Yeah, that's
and
what
then
they
ranching.
films on. Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about like what life was like on the ranch for them, and some of these items that they use?
Well, I think one of the things that's most striking when you look at the objects in the Walking Box collection and you pick them up and you hold them is that the Walking Box was a place where people really worked. At one point, it was the second largest ranch in Nevada. It was a ton of property. And these guys came from Hollywood. Clara Beau was a New York gal, went out to Hollywood, all of the hoopla, all of the glamour. But when they came to Searchlight, it was game on. These guys were not out there to, yes, they entertained famous people. They certainly had a lot of their Hollywood friends over, but they were out there working the ranch, and so were their kids. I mean, they were doing the business of ranching, and I think the collection really reflects that.
So Rex Bell was not only a cowboy, but he was a man who loved fashion.
He did. One of the exciting things about his long and interesting career in Nevada was that he had a clothing shop in downtown Las Vegas, and he sold a lot of super cool embroidered, elaborate cowboy-inspired clothing. Of course, I don't think a lot of the stuff real cowboys would have been wearing, but it certainly gave that shout out to the old school West and the sort of excitement of that. So some of the objects in the collection really represent that. That is his label from his store. And the thing that's really interesting about this piece is that it's all hand-done embroidery. It is really the highest quality you can get. He was producing some stuff in Las Vegas, but mostly in Los Angeles because that's where the craftsmen were. So he would take orders, fulfill those orders through people in Los Angeles and bring them back and sell them here, because there were a lot of people coming to town and they wanted to take home a piece of the American West, and he gave that to them.
So he had his own shop.
He had his own shop, and it was a very successful shop. He sold a lot of cowboy hats and a lot of sort of cowboy-inspired clothing.
So not only did he have a fascination with fashion and being a cowboy, but he also loved the detail in leather, correct, by some of the items that you were showing me earlier?
Absolutely, and it really speaks to the kind of level of production and level of quality that these guys were used to, right? They still were Hollywood stars. So you look at a lot of the objects that were in their house, that were in their possession, that they had custom made for them. Like, for example, this hand-tooled leather holder for these horns. I mean, you know, this is a real craftsman who's working on these kinds of items, and all of this stuff was custom done for the Bells. Like this, as well as a bunch of other sort of objects in the collection. We really are lucky to have them preserved. And they're preserved because his son knew that they were important, and he kept them and donated them to UNLV, and thankfully they weren't tossed in the dustbin of history like so many things often are.
Look at this. Look at the detail. Did you get an up close of this? And she had custom-made furniture, right? Her couch and all those things.
She had custom-made furniture. She had a big, beautiful, long dining room table that was like a ranch-style dining room table. We have beautiful pictures of her and her friends, you know, having dinner at these places. She wasn't much of a cook. That was sort of the legendary joke, because she could only make macaroni and cheese. But she also entertained a lot of people at the house. She had a lot of her Hollywood friends come over and experience what it was like in Searchlight and in the region at that time. So they had a big, beautiful custom-made table, custom-made desks, custom-made benches, all brought over from Los Angeles. And you know, of course, these are the days before you could just zing down the highway and get it. They did a lot of work to get the objects to the ranch because they had a very specific idea of what they wanted the ranch to be.
Do you have some photos and archive of the furniture? Because when we did a walkthrough, it's one thing to look at the home and it's just simplicity of it, but then when you add in their characteristics of what the home looked like when they lived there, it just paints a different image.
Well, this is what the walking box looked like for many years. While it was, many people probably had gone out there from the 80s, the sort of late 80s through the mid 2000s. You could go out and you can see some of the objects that belonged to the Bells that were out there. But we definitely have archival footage of what it looked like when Clara herself decorated it, and that's really exciting. And it's great for us to be able to say, oh, this is original to ranch because I saw it in the picture, because you know, we see them in the picture, so it's we can sort of reconstruct what they were doing, yeah, and how they were decorating the house.
Can I pick this up? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Yeah. So when you hold these objects in your hand and you think about like what it means to work with them, you can see all of the things that were happening at the ranch. They were melting metal in order to make their own, you know, materials to work with. Because you can't run into Vegas real quick and grab stuff.
There's nowhere else to go.
There's nowhere else to go. They were so self-sufficient that really is something that I think really strikes the modern person, is how much they were able to do on site. And so these are some of those kind of things. We have, you know, and just stuff like this. I mean, imagine just working this.
Let me do this.
I mean, it's just like, and these kinds of things. This is what my students really love. A little hand drill. I mean, feel this.
All right, let me set this down. Let me set down the shovel.
Set down the shovel. Yeah. Imagine working with that.
I can't. I mean, this is,
and that's
one
so
different
of,
than what we use today.
Yeah, one of hundreds of these kinds of objects.
I love how hands-on you can be at this place and how you're able to learn so much, not only by looking at them, but by touching them, feeling the items, and kind of take a glimpse back into history. And so it's really neat that you're able to teach your students another way of learning, and not just by seeing it, but by touch.
Well, I think that's a really, as a professor and as a lover of Nevada, to get my students to come in here, put their hands on these objects, better understand what we're trying to teach them, you know, history is more than a textbook. History is more than watching a documentary. You know, it's really when you get in here and you feel these objects, you get a much stronger sense of the lives that people lived. And at the ranch, that's particularly important because people are living out there, working out there, and to really understand, you know, what their lived experience was. To come in and touch the same objects that they touched really allows the students' imagination to take off. And it's such a great way to teach history. And it's, you know, UNLV has been so supportive of this project because they understand that, and they're so supportive supportive of hands-on learning, and it's such a big initiative of the university, so we get an incredible amount of support from all levels of the administration.
I'm a big fan of UNLV. I went to UNLV, so so it brings me back to memory lane.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time and
you are
showing
more than
us
welcome.
This collection.
I love it. I love it. I love to share it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're gonna wrap up here. That's it. I really enjoyed seeing Rex and Clara's collection. Deidre even gave me a lucky horseshoe from the Walking Box Ranch. Now it's time to meet one of her students who has been working closely with her on this project. Hi, Cassidy. Nice to meet you. This is David Purdy. He does all of the filming, editing, sound for Spirit of Nevada and drone work. What do we have here in front of us?
Well, part of the Walking Box collection that's really exciting and really unique is the rugs, the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s Navajo rugs. Of course, many of them are not Navajo, they're just sort of generally termed Navajo. Now, what's kind of interesting about this collection is it didn't belong to Rex and Clara. It represents a later stage of the ranch's development, which is—
Can I take this off?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Which is from the 1980s, and these are rugs that were made in the 1930s but purchased in the 1980s by the woman who ran, whose husband was with Viceroy Mining, and they renovated the ranch to be as it would have been when Rex and Clara lived, and they had a major collection of rugs, and now we have them here at UNLV.
And she would hang the rugs on the walls.
Oh, she'll hang the rugs on the wall, which from a material culture standpoint is quite bad because it distorts the rugs. And so rugs are really supposed to be on the ground. They're quite hardy, as you can see.
Heavy.
It's heavy. It's meant to, it has a very functional purpose. It's meant to trap the dirt, trap the dust. And of course, it's a really interesting look at what the Southwest in America it looks like. And these are just spot on, beautifully made, and beautifully representative of all the things that make the ranch awesome.
So Cassidy, what has it been like working on this project for the Walking Box Ranch?
It's been a pretty awesome experience, really, with all different sorts of aspects going into it. In high school, I studied Beau. I was a film major, and so I never really expected that to intersect with me being a history major as well. So when I started with a workshop to initially get involved with this project, and realizing that it was working with Beau's items and even Rex Bell's, just as these classic Hollywood stars, and to have these items from their daily lives working with, it was a really cool experience and then bring in the history aspect of learning these methods of handling these items, also from that angle of having these Hollywood stars. So it's been I've really enjoyed it.
How cool is that? You come from film and history. That's what I love too.
Yeah,
so that's really neat. That's really neat. So you talk about items and how you're supposed to hold them or care for them and store them. When you're looking at a rug like this, what goes into making sure this is still preserved, for other people to be able to enjoy?
So I think one of the biggest concerns is the color with the dyes in there. So a big part of having acid-free tissue paper to preserve the coloring, and so that if it's being rolled up, that it's not bleeding onto other portions of the rug. So we have that in there, and there's also a wooden pole that'll help maintain the structure.
Is this under here?
Yes, to keep it round, and to keep so it's flat as well when it gets rolled out. And then so you roll that up with the tissue paper and the wooden pole to protect each layer of the rug as it's being rolled. And then there's an outer cover here, pretty much just to cover the entire roll, to keep any of outside, like dirt or anything that could, or any sort of animal or anything that could potentially harm the rug, just to keep another layer of protection.
Now, there's so much that goes into their collection, right? We have rugs, we have stuff from their ranch, we have Rex's clothing collection. What is your favorite piece from the home?
I've always really liked, there's a trunk from Rex Bell.
The green one?
Yes, yeah. And because initially when I was first starting with the workshop, initially getting involved, it was locked, and so we didn't know what was inside of it. And so there was kind of this mysterious, just trying to figure out, there could be nothing in here, or there could be some amazing documents or something incredible in here. So I think for that kind of aspect, I always really was just kind of fascinated by that chest and just wanting to get in there and see if there's anything inside of there.
Yeah, no, I see your excitement because I went to the house. I toured their home with the friends at the Walking Box Ranch, and as I was looking around, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how cool would it be to see the items that they had in their home. And so and then when I got super excited, I see like you're excited because when I saw that too, I'm like wondering what was in there. And then her makeup bin, and you know, it's neat that UNLV takes the time to preserve history, and so that students like yourself can actually see these things, and it makes a difference in just looking at a photo.
Right, and then it's special too when you see these items, and then we have photographs from the house, and so now we're seeing these items in their context in this home with Rex and Clara and the family surrounding it, and so it just adds another element of just really the historical context of this particular item that you're working with.
How cool is that?
When they study Rex and Clara, they study really the uniqueness of Nevada. And you know, as I've mentioned before, I'm a gal from Pennsylvania. I never thought I would love Nevada like this. And these objects really make it very clear what makes the Southwest so incredibly unique. And makes makes the students really understand what their environment is. People say there's no history in Vegas. It's all around us.
I agree.
I have a ton of it right here, and that's what makes shows like yours so important, and makes a lot of the outreach that we do so important, because there's just a ton of stuff here, and like we need to make sure that we appreciate it and celebrate it and preserve it.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that, because we travel to all different parts of Nevada, and before I did the show, I didn't know about half the things that existed, and so I know you've learned a lot as well being in this class, and about Nevada and the history and how unique a design is to a time period. You were telling me earlier, this color represents, when we were looking at the second rug, this color represents later on, during the 60s. Did you say 60s?
Yes.
Yeah, during the 60s, and so I just think that it is neat to be able to see it, feel it, and be a part of such a big community that cares so much.
Well, and to also know that historical objects are things that we interact with. You know what I mean? Not everything gets to be in a museum and be preserved. I mean, these are rugs. We could put them on the ground and people could walk on them, and in 20 years we'll still be like, hey, those are the rugs. I mean, we're not going to do that.
Yes.
But we could, because they're functional items, and I think that's really important for students to touch things. When I first give students objects in a class and say, hold this, pass this around the class, they're often like, and nervous, but by the end of the class, they're, two-handing it to each other, and they're really getting the idea that like history doesn't have to be museum level perfect. It's just studying things that other people have used in the past.
Yeah, and I appreciate you digging up these rugs and laying them out for us to look at today.
Well, we love to share, don't we, Cassidy?
Yeah, and thank you for your time and coming out here and sitting down with me and telling me your experience. So it almost takes me back in time.
Any chance I get.
I know, right? I know, you could be teaching me something.
I don't know how.
All right, perfect. UNLV is doing a wonderful job providing a way for students to learn in a hands-on kind of way. And Deidre, I just love watching you work with the students. You truly have passion for what you do. I love learning new stuff every day, which reminds me of my favorite Albert Einstein quote, which says, if you feed your mind as often as you feed your stomach, you'll never have to worry about feeding your stomach, a roof over your head, or the clothes on your back. I'm Samantha Chion, but you can call me Sam with Spirit of Nevada. Brought to you by the Richard Harris Law Firm.